Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honour to close the scholar presentations at this incredible super conference. Brace yourselves for a 12-minute whistle-stop tour of all things edible insects, how they fit into UK ag, and most importantly, whether insect farming can make any money. Many of you may have heard the hype about insect farming, and if you haven't, let me tell you that hundreds of millions of pounds have poured into the sector. In fact, one British insect farm in South Africa received over £100 million from a single investor, and that insect farm failed. However, other insect farms are springing up in their place, and there is a lot of noise about edible insects as a sustainable protein source to replace soya in animal feed. The two most common types of commercially farmed insects are black soldier flies, shown here on the left. Flies are the adult form, and the product are maggots, which are harvested. And on the right-hand side of the slide are mealworms. The adults are beetles, and the larval form are like a kind of caterpillar. There are advantages and disadvantages to different types of edible insects, but they can all be vertically farmed, which makes efficient use of resources such as land and water. Insect farms can be small and fit into a container, or the size of several football pitches. Farming insects produces three major products. Protein is the main product, as well as oil, and the byproduct of farming insects is frass, a high-quality organic fertilizer. There are some obvious efficiency advantages to farming insects for use in livestock feed, rather than feeding livestock crops that could be fed directly to humans. Insects have the ability to upcycle inedible nutrients that can't be fed directly to humans or livestock. Also, insect farming is associated with a lower carbon footprint than for feed ingredients such as soya, as they can be grown locally in low-input systems. But a lot of the evidence for low-carbon insect farming seemed a little vague to me. So, against this background, I set out on my Nuffield travels to explore the question, can carbon-neutral edible insects be farmed profitably? And to answer this question, I explored whether the market is ready for edible insects, why insect farms are struggling to make a profit, and whether insect farming is really the sustainable solution that it's cracked up to be. To answer these questions, I travelled throughout the UK to assess the current edible insect landscape, including regulatory issues. Europe and Canada has some major insect farms, and I visited the Netherlands, Germany, and Canada to understand the context for the flourishing industrial-scale insect farming industries in these countries. Edible insects form part of the culture in much of Africa, and traditionally, insects have been harvested seasonally rather than farmed, although this is starting to change. I don't know if you've heard about this trip to Zimbabwe, but I was also on that trip, and I travelled to Botswana and South Africa to explore edible insects and opportunities for insect farming. So, is the market ready for edible insects? The human food market for edible insects is not ready. No, not in the Western world at least. And this is because the price for the product is too high and people don't really want to eat insects, except maybe as a dare. In the UK, there is regulation that prevents insects being sold as food on supermarket shelves, and regulatory approval for products is high risk and expensive. But the real problem is that even if those regulatory barriers didn't exist, as in Canada, where insects can be sold as human food, there is very little demand. A cricket farm that I visited in Canada produces these dried, flavoured crickets as snacks for people, but they have no offtake agreements, and sales direct to customers are slow. In Africa, it's a completely different story. Edible insects form part of the culture. some insect farms are starting to emerge, and there is strong demand for the product, both for human food and animal feed. There are large and growing markets for edible insects for animal feed. As low-carbon alternatives to soy-based animal feed are sought, insects have taken centre stage. For salmon and shrimp, poultry and pig feed, as well as pet food, insect-based feed is nutritionally suitable and often has other health and welfare benefits. Insects form part of the natural diet of many animals, and so it's fair to say that we don't have to convince animals to eat insects. However, although in theory there are large and growing animal feed markets for edible insects, this has not translated into booming sales for insect farmers. The main reason for this is that the cost per tonne of edible insects is too high compared to subsidised competitor feedstock ingredients such as soya. But even if we could solve the cost price issue, in the UK, regulation prohibits the sale of insect-derived ingredients into many animal feed markets, including poultry. Only whole live insects can be sold commercially as livestock feed, and whole live insects don't fit well into feed rations. Therefore, most commercial insect farms sell their product into the pet food market, where there is less strict regulation. So why are insect farms struggling to make a profit? Well, there can be high capital expenditure required to set up insect farms, and there is an energy requirement which has increased in cost as energy prices have gone up. However, all commercial insect farms that I spoke to named substrate or insect feed as their biggest cost, up to 70% of the cost of production. Now, this seems a little odd when you think that the big advantage of insects is that they can eat waste streams. The concept of a profitable insect farm is underpinned by the use of cheap waste products as insect feed. But in reality, almost every insect farm that I visited used soya or cereal-based livestock feed to feed the insects. How can insect ingredients compete on price with soya when they use soya as an input, introduce an energy and labour-intensive step in the middle, and then try to compete on price with soya? In fact, from my travels, it seemed that insect ingredients are around 10 times the price of soya. The maths just don't add up. So the real question is, why, when the superpower of insects is that they can convert inedible nutrients into edible protein, are insect farmers using soya or cereal-based insect feed when this undermines the whole business model? In the UK, regulation prevents the use of many waste nutrient sources such as slurry and catering waste, as not enough is known about the risk of using these substrates. For vegetal waste streams that can be used, such as seasonal apple pressings or pumpkins after Halloween, changes in substrate cause dramatic changes in the composition of the insects, which makes them too variable as an ingredient. Plus, changing the diet of insects so drastically kills off the insects after a few generations. In the EU and Africa, there are not such strict regulations around what can be fed to insects. So, are edible insects a sustainable solution? If waste streams can be fed to insects and renewable energy is used to heat the facility, then yes, insect farming can be a low-carbon source of protein. However, if soya is used to feed the insects and fossil fuel-derived energy is used to heat the facility, insect farming may not be the sustainable solution that we want it to be. In conclusion, is the market ready for edible insects? Not yet in the UK because of regulatory barriers and price. Insects are too expensive to compete. Why are commercial insect farms struggling to make a profit? In the UK, the ability of insects to upcycle waste nutrients is not being exploited due to regulation. This is not such an issue in other countries where insect farming is flourishing. And are edible insects a sustainable source of protein? They can be if waste streams are used to feed the insects and renewable energy is used in the facility. And so we come to my recommendations. There is a need for sustainable protein to feed livestock, and edible insects tick the nutrition and the sustainability boxes. But currently, the issue of profitability is a sticking point. However, this is likely to change as regulatory hurdles are overcome. There are great opportunities for insect farming in many parts of Africa where regulation and market factors are favourable. In the UK, insect farming could be integrated into modern farming systems to convert waste into animal feed. This localised approach to insect farming would reduce waste to landfill and simultaneously provide a source of livestock feed and organic fertiliser in the form of frass. Helpfully, 2024 Nuffield scholar David Travener is exploring this for his Nuffield study topic. And that brings me to my final slide, with a nod to the Nuffield Farming sponsors. And when it comes to sponsors, I really hit the jackpot with the Richard Laws Foundation. This picture of Bobby Laws, who goes to great lengths to get to know the scholars that he sponsors. It's been such a delight to get to become acquainted with Bobby and his family, and I'm truly grateful for the opportunity that the sponsorship afforded me with my travels. And of course, I must thank my friends and family who supported me on my Nuffield journey. Your Royal Highness, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.